The mission to capture a group of illegal immigrants who crossed the border between America and Mexico is shown at the opening of the story. For the border region in this instance, the CIA is collaborating with special forces. However, as the immigrants gathered, one man fled in the direction of the ravine. He unwrapped the bag that held the explosives as he was standing on the precipice. After some time of prayer, the man detonated the explosives. The consequence was the death of 4 security personnel and the Arab man. As a result, the U.S. administration sent special forces to look into this situation right away. However, a gang of dubious individuals entered a Kansas City grocery store. The supermarket shop was abruptly rocked by multiple explosive explosions. The bombers prayed before detonating themselves and everyone around them, just like the guy who perished at the edge of the abyss. James Riley, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, ultimately gave a speech since the terror persisted. He vows to apprehend the terrorists as quickly as possible while threatening them. Matt Graver, the most violent CIA agent, stood in the background. He is now on a mission in the Gulf of Somalia with his men. Their objective was to eliminate a criminal organization that was holed up in a distant location. Matt questioned Bassier, the leader of the criminal group, the following day. At first, Bassier refused to acknowledge any involvement with the Yemenis who blew off the device in Kansas. But Matt was aware that Bassier was the one who allowed the terrorists to board a ship and head for Mexico. Matt then inquired as to Bassier's payer for this. Sadly, this man was unwilling to divulge any information. Matt was forced to kill Bassier's sibling as a result. Matt soon received information from Bassier. The Somali man claims that there is a connection between these terrorists and Carlos Reyes. He was the most potent cartel mafia in Mexico at the time. Miguel is a disturbed adolescent who we meet somewhere. He frequently misses school and resides in a border region. He spends his days hanging out with his cousin Hector. However, Miguel receives an invitation to a cartel one day where Hector works. He even receives some cash in exchange for wanting to join the group. The scene changed to reveal Matt Graver, who was already in the country. He went straight to see James without wasting any time. Cynthia Fords, a member of the ministry staff, was with him at the time. James got right into the meeting as soon as Matt walked in. The actual terrorists, in his opinion, are the Mexican drug cartels. They destabilize America by utilizing other terrorists. This is carried out to ensure seamless smuggling. Matt has a wild plan to fix this situation. He is going to incite violence between the 2 largest cartels in Mexico. Carlos Reyes's cartel and the Matamoros cartel are those 2 groups. They needed to kidnap Isabel, Carlos's youngest daughter, in order to carry out this plot. Everyone was shocked to hear that because the operation was extremely risky. However, since they were at a loss for options, James gave Matt the go-ahead to play dirty, as long as he met a certain requirement. James requested that Matt not deploy American Special Forces, so in order to complete this job, Matt will need to assemble a mercenary army. Matt contacts Troy, a third party, at night in order to hire mercenaries and their equipment. Additionally, he is prepared to spend a lot of money because the ministry would cover all expenses. Following that, Matt takes off for Bogotá right away to meet Alejandro, his best friend and the most brutal hitman in Latin America. Matt is informed right away that Carlos Reyes is his target this time. Carlos was also complicit in Alejandro's family killing, which is why Matt urged him to join. Carlos Reyes will get his retribution if he dies. Alejandro decides to kill the Matamoros cartel lawyer in order to start this battle. Alejandro told the lawyer to put on his glasses so he could view Alejandro's face well before killing him. Alejandro shot the lawyer quite hard after he had put on his spectacles. Following this cruel murder, word got out fast. As everyone's attention is drawn to the news, Matt and his group will keep working to abduct Isabel. Isabel, though, is still enrolled in her school. And she develops into an arrogant young woman, just like her father. She gets into arguments with her peers nearly every day. The teacher was actually very anxious and worn out when Isabel started to cause problems. But regardless of how terrible the issue was, Isabel's expulsion from the school was unthinkable. The victim was bleeding, but thanks to her father, she was still safe. Isabel's bodyguards came to get her as soon as the school bell rung. But they were unaware that they were the target of Matt Graver and his group. Matt started by turning off every signal in the vicinity. Matt then stops Isabel's vehicle. Matt and the others then hurried to take Isabel hostage. The girl was placed in the car and her head was covered. Alejandro provoked one of Isabel's bodyguards in the meanwhile. The guard reported it to Carlos Reyes because he pretended to be a part of the Matamoros cartel. Matt continued to watch Carlos home. There was a gunshot incident nearby that his guys are said to have been involved in. Matt gave the Tapper crew the command to track Carlos' whereabouts. Alejandro took Isabel to a safe home while Matt was occupied in the communications room. But Alejandro told his men to put Isabel in a room because she is still unable to see his face. Alejandro then goes on with his task while posing as an American police officer. To complete the mission, he collaborated closely with the local police force. In this manner, Isabel will believe that the Matamoros cartel abducted her. Furthermore, Alejandro follows the same protocols as the police as a whole. After escorting Isabel to a secure location, he questions her. Alejandro won't stop doing this until Matt gives him the all clear. Prior to proceeding with the assignment, Alejandro and Matt seek assistance from their longtime friend Rafael. Here, Matt intends to relocate Isabel close to the Matamoros cartel's headquarters. His goal was to ensure that the two largest cartels engaged in combat. Rafael was prepared to assist them upon hearing that. Matt was preparing to leave the meeting when his automobile nearly ran over Miguel in the parking lot. Miguel and Alejandro locked eyes at that moment. Miguel then understood that the vehicle belonged to the American police. Miguel and Hector traveled to Mexico in the evening. He got to know a powerful Matamoros, Gallo, there. Miguel accepted Hector's invitation to attend in order to formally join the cartel. Isabel would shortly be moved somewhere else, to the Matamoros region. Alejandro provided her with a bulletproof vest to ensure the girl's safety. The process of transferring was completed once everything was prepared. As they traveled, everything appeared to be going as planned. Rafael's assistance in getting the Mexican police to consent meant that no other gangsters were preventing them from doing so. But Matt thought Isabel looked suspicious. They also go on dirt roads and don't halt at the border. The federal police attacked Matt and Alejandro's team a short while later. It appeared that Carlos Reyes had paid them. Whether Matt and Alejandro liked it or not, they had to get out of the car to fight. Isabel, meantime, seized the opportunity to flee. Ultimately, Matt's group succeeded in encircling the attackers. As it turned out, the police car was purposefully hijacked by all of Carlos' guys. Matt wasted no time in eliminating them. Alejandro then made the decision to search for Isabel, who had fled. Matt was going to report this to headquarters with his troops. Prior to happened, though, Alejandro received a tracking chip from Matt, enabling him to assist Alejandro in times of need. A Mexican police car stopped Matt's path once more as Alejandro was searching for Isabel. Angry, Matt fired at the police car. Eventually, Matt and his group were able to get back to the U.S. However, Isabel discovered that the person driving the car was her father's subordinate when she approached him for assistance when he was crossing the desolate road. Isabel was compelled to be transported home, but she didn't want to. And Alejandro instantly rendered the man immobile. Alejandro then took the automobile and drove Isabel to a secure location. Isabel was aware at this point that Alejandro was the one who had taken her hostage. The action then shifted to Matt and Kincha bickering at a military post. Matt was furious that the ministry had abruptly cancelled their mission. All of this occurred as a result of Matt's crew killing a Mexican policeman, which was widely publicized. As a result, the administration was forced to abort the mission. Alejandro and Isabel remained in Mexico since they didn't want the expedition to be called off. They also made the decision to ask the locals for assistance because of the heat. They met the genuinely nice deaf man named Angel a short while after. Thankfully, Alejandro could communicate with others through sign language, which led Angel to believe that Alejandro was a decent man. Matt, Cynthia, and Matt's assistant Steve Forsing attended an emergency meeting called by the ministry at the same time. This time, Isabel was a witness to the last shooting, so they had to take her into custody right away. But Matt would not be in charge of this endeavor. Instead, the Ministry of Defense granted Cynthia complete command, and as soon as the tracking device was turned on, she gave Matt and his group the order to search for Isabel. Matt, though, appears dubious. He doesn't want to interfere with Alejandro's plan for retribution. His best friend will never be able to get his revenge if he kills Isabel. Isabel is consuming food prepared by Angel and his spouse in another location. In the meantime, Alejandro receives a call from Matt abruptly ordering him to murder Isabel. Alejandro declined, though, since he was still determined to murder Carlos Reyes. Conversely, the Matamoros cartel resumed its covert illegal immigration trafficking. However, Miguel was dispatched as a guide this time. And when he joined the cartel, this was his first task. The illegal immigrants eventually reach their objective after forging through rivers and brush. They will then be transported by a freight truck. Alejandro is getting ready to cross the border with firearms at the same time. You can only meet Carlos Reyes in that manner. Alejandro is preoccupied with himself when Isabel abruptly claims to know who he really is and that her father planned the murder of Alejandro's family. But she refused to stand up for her dad. Isabel ultimately wants to assist Alejandro. She had to change her name to Karina and cut her hair in order to pull off the disguise. Consequently, Alejandro and Isabel headed toward the border without further delay. In addition, Alejandro turned on the tracking device he had implanted in Isabel's shoes. He took this action because he knew Matt would support him. Alejandro and Isabel eventually showed up at the illegal immigrant checkpoint shortly after. The Matamoros cartel was skilled at this station. Matt and his group were getting ready to head over to Alejandro's apartment elsewhere. To avoid being discovered by the Mexican police, they planned to utilize a helicopter. Alejandro was approached by Hector shortly after, who requested payment. Alejandro then gave the $1,000 cash. Alejandro's approach initially went according to plan. However, Miguel panicked when he unintentionally saw Alejandro's face because he had already met Alejandro, which is why everything went wrong. He informed Hector right away that Alejandro was a police officer. As a result, Hector pretended to drive Alejandro to the border. However, as soon as they got to a desolate area, Hector and his companions aimed a rifle at Alejandro. Alejandro was then searched, and all of his firearms were taken away. While Alejandro attempted to maintain composure and decided to talk to Gallo, they also removed Isabel off the bus. Alejandro says he is the man who belongs to Carlos Reyes and wants to take Isabel back home. If he fails, there's no doubt that the cartels will start fighting and Matamoros may end up decimated. Gallo chooses to beat Alejandro because he doesn't think he's telling the truth. Alejandro and Isabel are then brought to a distant location. However, Matt's team's location is still too far away. To cut a long tale short, Alejandro was shot by Jose, Gallo's man. However, Jose was shot to death by Gallo because he dared not harm anyone. Miguel then received the rifle from Gallo. After accepting it, the boy shot Alejandro right away. Gallo and his men abandoned Alejandro in the midst of the desert once it was determined that he was dead. Matt, meantime, was observing the murder via the tracking camera. He was unable to contain his anguish. Finally, in a fit of rage, Matt gave the order for his group to eliminate Gallo and every one of his soldiers. Miguel made the decision to descend while traveling to the cartel headquarters. Because he had killed someone, he was filled with guilt. However, Alejandro's body moved in an unexpected way. Miguel shot the hitman in the cheek rather than the head, so it turned out that he was still alive. After the chopper managed to encircle Gallo's party a little while later, Matt and his squad launched an indiscriminate assault on them right away. Even though it was against Cynthia's orders, Matt chose not to kill Isabel after brutally murdering them because he would take her to witness protection. Alejandro was finally able to free his hands as the day grew hotter. Despite his significant blood loss, Alejandro is still able to move with strength. After robbing Gallo of his car, he left the body inside. Members of the Matamoros cartel ambushed him unexpectedly while he was traveling. Alejandro hurled a grenade quickly toward their vehicle. Miguel was saw working at a food booth a year later. He entered the kitchen at that moment, only to see Alejandro standing there. Here, Alejandro was already aware of Miguel's desire to follow in his footsteps as a hitman. He would thus instruct Miguel, and the movie is over.